Thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Eliza, for closing the door. Hello, I'm Sarah Calvin, and I'll be giving an analysis on 21st century student housing trends in the United States. Awesome. And although I'll be showing lots of wonderful examples of successful designs, I wanted to first begin with a failed housing design, which would have been known as Munger Hall at UC Santa Barbara. UC Santa Barbara prides itself on being close to the coast, but this design would have failed to identify itself with the school's main characteristics. There we go. There are only single rooms, and even worse, there are no real windows that can look out onto that beautiful ocean view. Although this project was not fully executed, one would have to wonder what could have led this design in a better direction. This research is about analyzing identifiable architecture trends among post-2000 higher education residential housing designs. Many recent projects support sustainable living by minimizing harm to the environment, as well as maximizing student well-being. Through the focus on the building's form, materials, and power systems, contemporary residential housing designs distinguish between private, public, and transitional spaces. These layouts accommodate diverse residential needs, such as ADA, specific student cohorts, and institutional size. In working with a pool of recent projects, this presentation examines the trends through the lenses of site location, institutional identity, architecture firm, and marketing points. And based on this analysis, I will conclude with speculations as to the causative factors that may account for today's student housing trends, such as climate, policy, technology, and utilitarian ideals. And having looked at the history of residence halls in the United States, from the first storm being at Harvard to seeing how the GI Bill affects residential occupancy, I turn my thinking to the 21st century and ask myself, what are the main trends of 21st century student housing projects? And what is driving these designs, and how might today's residential options promote student well-being, institutional goals, or cost effectiveness? And so I did a qualitative study that analyzed over 100 designs that were built after the year 2000. And I analyzed the year, housing name, university, location, architect or firm that oversaw the project, any 21st century trends, what was being marketed to the students, and I found this information through architecture articles in newspapers, university residence life websites, and architecture firms. I would then compare and contrast these points and housing trends to each other, and although I will not be showing every dorm that I did in this study, there are some strong examples that I would want to share with you today that best capture these 21st century trends. Firstly, many trends in 21st century student housing designs promote sustainability by building form, landscape materials, and energy efficient power systems to adjust for local weather, climate, and surrounding environment. And through my research, I repeatedly saw many dorms that contained LEED certification, and LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, and it was first introduced in 1999 by the U.S. Green Building Council. This is the most widely used rating system in 186 countries and territories, and it serves as a sustainability outline for architects. However, the LEED certification comes at a cost. So another way that architects are encouraged to build sustainability is through the 2030 Architecture Challenge adopted by the American Institute of Architects in 2006. And this aims to reduce 60% of fossil fuel energy use compared to the current baseline by 2030. And I brought in Elm, Pomper, and Alder Hall at the University of Washington in Seattle, and they both are part of this 2030 Architecture Challenge, as well as they hold a really high LEED certification. And I will be showing you further examples that will connect sustainability through form, materials, and power use systems. My first example is at Tooker House at Arizona State, and it's built by Solomon Cordwell Bunez, and it holds 1,582 beds. The form of the building allows for many opportunities of self-shaded interior courtyards, as seen on the right, and there are U-shaped visors on the windows that add a layer of protection from the sun. The rainwater is collected from the roof and is put into local bioswales that help reduce the amount of underground piping that is needed for the infrastructure. And then in my next slide, I have a clear image of the form that demonstrates airflow and how the water is harvested for the irrigation system. And then another unique form design is Granville 1500 at UCLA, and this structure fits 153 units. I brought another top-down view to see these 3 discrete wedge-shaped volumes that contain lots of cutaways and slants through their form. And besides the form that we can see here, we can also notice the rooftop solar panels towards the back of the building, as well as the high albedo cooler roof system that helps reduce the amount of heat that is absorbed in the natural ventilation system. This overall helps with the amount of energy consumption and energy cost. And then in my next slide, there are open air pockets that we can see inside of the building, which creates a unique sense of indoor and outdoor space. And having these high efficiency systems, Granville 1500 has earned a top rated LED certification. And not just large student housing designs take sustainability measures. I also have Sontag Hall and Diana's Hall, and they contain about 150 beds, and it's built under our lead architect Whitney Wyatt. This is the first residence hall to get a highest rated LED certification in California. And these dorms even abandoned their traditional terracotta roof system, which is a school trademark, and they instead place gardens, solar roof panels, and a thermal siphon system. And this creates these areas of living learning spaces on top of the buildings. And also this building contains the Office of Sustainability Department in their South Hall. And then looking at an even smaller dormitory and campus community is the Eco Dorm at Warren Wilson College, and it contains 38 beds. It was built by Semswell Architects and is the first on any college campus to receive the highest LED certification on an already existing buildings category. They take a lot of water conservation measures, including a 92% efficient gas boiler system, which just means for every $1 they spend on fuel, 92 cents are used to heat the building while only 8 cents are wasted. They use solar power water preheating, low flow shower fixtures, waterless urinals, and a 10,000 gallon rainwater system that pumps the water collected from the roof runoff. They're able to use these systems to flush their toilets or water their community garden. And this student housing design fits particularly well with the community on their campus. They only have 800 undergraduate students. And secondly, I will be discussing how student housing designs accommodate for students. This next trend has to do with how institutions and architects aim to create buildings that accommodate for their student population and for diverse residential needs. And by that, I refer to ADA accommodation, specific student cohorts, or institutional size. And while the designs of public, private, and transitional spaces must create a sense of harmony, the architecture has to fit with ADA regulations and safety standards. And keeping in mind that ADA does not just accommodate for physical disabilities, but it also includes non-visible disabilities. And under the Fair Housing Act, architectural accommodations can range from accessible pathways from how small a space in the kitchen can be. And I'm going to be showing you a few examples of architecture that meet the needs of specific goals. And then one of them is being the River House. And then in my next slide, I'll show sort of how the River House is a public-private partnership between Brown University, the University of Rhode Island, and Rhode Island College. SGA Architects focuses on creating smooth transitional spaces and design choices between the indoor and outdoor spaces. This is a unique partnership between the schools that allows for diverse, enriching community among graduate students in particular, and it has 270 beds in total and includes 2 roof decks, a riverfront view, and walkable pathways around the complex. If we can get 2 slides over, yeah, there we go. And we can see these walkable pathways around the complex. These elongated ramps and pathways spaces allow room for everyone, and even people without disabilities can benefit from this design. I'm particularly thinking about the rapid move in and out during every fall and spring semester. The interior of the spaces is well lit because of the large-scale windows, and according to the National Library of Medicine, daylight exposure can overall help health and improve sleep quality. Another residential space that focuses on accessibility through their pathways is Eagle Ridge Student Housing at Chadron State College, and this contains 23 beds per unit for upper-class students. This is a smaller university that wants to focus on building up social skills, and the Arch Daily, which is an architecture newspaper, mentions that Eagle Ridge utilizes forms reminiscent of the local homes and typical agrarian architecture, with the small-scale units drawing heavily on the established visual language of the region. And in our next slide, we can see that each building is 9,000 square feet, but these are the dimensions of what a studio or apartment can look like for a resident. The college website is very transparent about the dimensions of the space and includes interactive images on their website. And each room for the resident contains a naturally lit window that looks out into the rolling hills and the landscape of the area. And while Child Run State wants students to enjoy the rural landscape from the inside, they also want students to have accessible and enjoyable routes on the outside. Here is a top-down sketch in my next slide of the pathways throughout the housing units, and notice that each of the units are connected to each other to enhance social interaction. Next, I have is Legacy Hall, which was built by BCWH Architects, who also wants to enhance social interaction, but among freshman students. And this is a 306-bed facility that contains community bathrooms and shared single rooms. There's a lot of natural daylight and large-scale windows in the front facade, and there are public courtyards as well as private courtyards that are spread throughout the complex. And this mimics the interior spaces of the design and the smaller nook areas that are close to the dorms. And considering most of the residents have shared single rooms with another person, this allows them to have some sense of privacy even within the hallways. Another all-freshman residence hall that I wanted to share is at Howard University in Washington, D.C., and this is built by McKiskack Architects. And College Hall North is located close to main campus, so it really helps students to feel more integrated into campus life. The hall holds 460 beds and contains mostly double rooms, and compared to our last example, this is a historically black college, and it's a hall for women only. They have an indoor fitness center, study rooms, and 16 furnished lounges within the dorm. And my last 21st century trend that I will be showing is how architecture still values tradition. Student housing designs aim to connect back to the identity of the institution. And because the locations in universities and cities have an extensive history, the materials and identity of the location limit the amount of space and materials that are available for the project. Adjacent buildings, historical sites, or even the school colors of a university can impact the color scheme or facade of a dorm. And I brought in this model of Sister Thea Bowen residence at St. Joseph University, which will actually be opening this fall. And it's a 578-bed facility, and it's built currently under Blackney Hayes Architects, and they use specifically masonry stones to fit with the rest of campus's identity and architecture. And similarly, in my next slide, I have the Academy in California, who also took the consideration of their surrounding areas. This is a 656-unit structure built by Perkins and Will, and they use fluted aluminum panels in reference to their neoclassic architecture, surroundings, and classical column orders. The coloration of the aluminum panels mimics that of 100 McAllister, which is an apartment building of the Art Deco style, just a block on the other end. And then I have an inside view of the inside of the dorm that appreciates the neoclassical courthouse from the interior window and a shot of the street view. And then next we have the Campus North Residential Commons at the University of Chicago, which was created by Studio Gang Architects in 2016, which fits about 800 students. And the facade contains 1,000 precasted concrete panels, and this was informed by the university's neo-Gothic architecture style. Unlike many projects, this sits at the north end of campus and acts as a new front door, or bridging the gap between the campus and the greater neighborhood community. And then in my last example, I have Birdsong Hall by BCWH Architects, which holds about 120 students, and the student housing structure is built around a pre-existing football field. The building includes large porches, exterior gathering spaces, large roof terraces, and a 200-seat banquet hall for events. The brick facade, arches, white trim are all key characteristics of the rest of campus's architecture and identity. In conclusion, I've given you an analysis of post-2000 higher education residential housing designs, and it is evident that many recent examples support sustainable living through their efforts of LEED certification and creating cost-effective solutions for their institutions. We can speculate that this increased interest of building sustainability is due to climate change and further research of the American Institute of Architects regarding building systems. Additionally, we can speculate that policies and technology can affect the layouts that accommodate for diverse residential needs and safety standards. Lastly, we can speculate that student housing market is one of the driving factors that determine these architecture trends. And to be transparent, to analyze every single dorm that was built after 2000 is impossible because of the limited amount of information that is revealed about the architecture of these projects. However, further areas that could be explored is getting the perspective of students, faculty, staff, who have been on these projects or have lived in these dorms. I could further analyze the economics of the student housing, where universities create more cost-effective designs, and I can analyze the trends on the international scale and see if the trends in the United States translate internationally. Now, I started this presentation with Munger Hall, so I might as well end it off with Munger Hall. And this is to show and demonstrate that these designs are more complex than one might expect. Munger Hall failed to recognize the needs of current students and the uniqueness of their university's location. By looking at the trends of today's student housing designs, I hope that you've gained a deeper understanding of the significance of these buildings and how they have the ability to promote institutional goals and the well-being of students today. Thank you. And I have my references too on the next slide, if it works. I can take any questions. Yeah.
Maybe this is too specific, so you can just tell me. I'm wondering about the dorm or the residence hall at Warren Wilson, and because you mentioned low flow toilets thing. I actually have a friend in that area who's an eco builder. I mean, that's not his work, but how does that over time? What do students say about those features, like low flow toilets and water saving showers? When you put groups in them, how does it actually affect them?
Well, I mostly analyzed from like an architecture standpoint, so I'm not sure what the students would say because I've never been to any of these dorms, but I imagine it highlights the importance of sustainability for students, and while they're in school, it gets them to start thinking about like how they can start using that in their daily life and hopefully carry that from the time they're at the college to translate after school as well. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, a few years ago, I remember seeing something that like there's really low oversight on architects designing some dorms. I don't know if this is true, but have you noticed any like, I guess, architects who've played too much and haven't really like adopted the building? Like I saw one where like the architect there was like no exit, like fire exit. Like like these students couldn't escape only from like this one exit that they had. Was there any like poorly designed buildings that you were like really like this is not true?
I think Munger Hall was the most striking for me for sure, and I'm glad it wasn't ever fully executed or built. But I think there's a lot of ADA or safety standards that have to be put in place so that the fire exits do exist, because there's a lot more people that have to go past those for them to be in place. But yeah, looking at the models are quite fascinating and really interesting. So, but.
So, do you have any just general critiques of campus residence halls?
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
Well, I am an RA, and it's great to see many of my residents or past coworkers. Shout out Res Life. And so my knowledge about residence halls on campus is so deeply rooted in sort of like the interactions I've had and how I've been trained here, and so it just would have been unfit to incorporate that into my research, considering I have a bias, obviously, because I love working here. So definitely, even though we have like a really great, like Hunt Hall was built by a really amazing architect, but it would have been unfair to include it knowing that I've been in that residence hall and knowing that I know the ins and outs versus all these other dorms. So, and I've gained a lot of deeper insight. So.
Great answer.
Yeah.
If I may, on that same vein, would you say that being an RA is something that you've carried into looking at each of those designs, however?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I hope to one day to visit some of these places and see if it, like on paper, it matches with what it said. So. Last call for questions. Thank you.
Sarah, it has been an absolute joy. It is an absolute joy to have you as an advisee, as one of our students, a student in my classes, among others, and as a member of the art community and the Visu department here. Also, knowing you are part of the RA world as well as part of the psychology department, it's just sort of mind-boggling. And you're definitely high on my list. I was just saying to somebody of students, I really, really want to see where you are in a half dozen years or so. Will it be the arts that win? Will it be psychology that wins? Will it be something totally other? And today I found myself wondering, could it possibly also be architectural history? So all sorts of things lay out there. And I will say to the audience, if I can do this fairly, if you want to see Sarah's other side, next Thursday, the 24th, is the opening of the Senior Art Show over in the Art Gallery at 6 o'clock in the evening. And I think you plan to be there.
Maybe, just maybe.
I'm delighted to give you this.
Thank you.
There you go. Congratulations.
Thank you.